Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the March 29th Finance Subcommittee meeting. I now call the meeting to order. My name is Devin T. Murphy, and I'm the mayor of the city of Pinole. Good afternoon. Next on the agenda is public comment. Madam City Clerk, do we have any public comments this afternoon?
Yes, we do have one online, Irma Ruport.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Really quick, I don't know whether I should be speaking here on this public comment or should I wait for D1? I'm not sure if I'm in the right place. I have a comment on D1.
Thank you, Ms. Rupert. This item is public comment for items not on the agenda. So if you want to use the 3 minutes, this will be for items non-D1 items or items not on the agenda.
Okay, Mayor, I can wait. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, do we have any other public comments?
No, there are no more public comments.
All right, thank you so much. We'll close public comment, the item public comment tonight or this afternoon. And next on the agenda is our consent calendar. We don't have any consent items, so we'll go on to item D, which is business items. And we are ready for one item this afternoon, and I will turn it over to Finance Director, Director Guillory to present. This item is D1, which is the review of fiscal year 2023-2024 financial and investment policies. Good afternoon, Director Guillory.
Afternoon. Members of the Finance Subcommittee, everyone know I'm Markeisha Guillory, City's Finance Director. And this afternoon, I will be providing an overview of the fiscal year 2023-24 financial and investment policies. Staff's recommendation is for the Finance Subcommittee to review the proposed policies and recommend approval to go forward to the City Council or provide other direction to staff. So for this next slide, please. I'm sorry. And next slide. Okay. So I'm going to give an overview of the background of the financial policies and provide an overview of each policy that we currently have on the books. And at the conclusion, I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. So just a bit of background, financial policies are intended to set guidelines on how the city will manage its financial resources, and they also provide direction for financial decision-making. This is a normal part of our annual budgeting process where we bring the policies before the Finance Subcommittee before taking them to the full City Council for adoption. We take inventory of all policies to make sure that we're meeting industry best practices. We also refer to professional associations such as the Government Finance Officers Association to ensure that we have the right policies in place. We also compare to our peer agencies and again, make sure that we're meeting best practices within the industry. Our policies align with those standard financial policies that are recommended by the GFOA and other local agencies. And again, as a part of our annual budget process, we review the policies and update as necessary. So we don't have any major changes to any of the policies today. There are some minor language changes, and I also added context to the reserve policy, which we'll talk about in just a moment here. So I'll go through and just give an overview of each of the policies. Next slide, please. So we have our structurally balanced budget policy, and it says that the city will endeavor to create a proposed general fund budget that is structurally balanced. And what that means is that ongoing current expenditures are funded by ongoing current revenues. And if there's any imbalance, the city will target to develop a structurally balanced budget in the subsequent fiscal year. Next slide. We also have our reserve policy. It says the city will establish and maintain reserves to meet certain anticipated future obligations, as well as to prepare for any unanticipated impacts to our revenues, whether in the form of a revenue increase or revenue decrease and or an expenditure increase due to some unforeseen consequences, such as an emergency or a natural disaster or the like. So we do have our reserve set up, and the target is to maintain a balance that is equal to 50% of total ongoing general fund expenditures. And we are in compliance with that policy. This is the one where I added some context, and I just wanted to define how we classify the reserves that sit in that fund. So we do reserve them as what is called assigned fund balance. And what that means is that there are stipulations against those funds. They're set aside. We can't use them or appropriate them through the budget process. If you were or the council decided to appropriate any of those funds from the reserves, that would have to be done so by resolution that is adopted by the full city council. So within our generally accepted accounting principles, there are various classifications for the fund balance, and general reserves are classified as assigned fund balance. So there's some restrictions that have been placed on them by the city council. Next slide. We have a revenue policy that relates to one-time, non-recurring resources. And it says the city will strive to maintain a diversified and stable revenue base by having a diverse set of resources that we generate revenue from. So we have tax measure or tax revenues, charges for services, user fees, and so on. And it also says that our one-time resources will be used for one-time expenditures and we want to avoid funding ongoing expenditures with one-time revenues. Next slide. So our revenue policy that relates to user fees and charges, and says that the city of Pinole is authorized to recapture through fees up to the full cost of providing specific services. As you all may recall, we just conducted a comprehensive user fee study where the consultant looked at all user fees and all of the costs associated with providing those various services to the community. And again, the goal is to recover up to 100% of the cost of providing those services, but that's not always possible. There are some instances where there's a greater community benefit to subsidize. And one example would be for recreation programs where the city does subsidize those. And the goal is not to make the programs cost prohibitive to participants. And so in those cases, we don't collect 100% of the costs. Next slide. We have our expenditure and budget policy. It says the city will deliver service in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. Also states that the budget will map out the objectives of the various operating programs and identify the resources that are provided to accomplish specific objectives. This is done through the preparation of an annual operating and capital improvement budget, where we set up our financial plan. We have our revenue estimates. We also have our expenditures. We map out the objectives of all of our various programs and departments, as well as fund some capital improvement projects. And this policy, or we basically comply with this policy by preparing an annual comprehensive budget. Next slide. This is our debt policy. It says the city will limit the use of debt so as to not place a burden on the fiscal resources of the city and its taxpayers. Debt is also limited to capital improvement projects or other large projects that cannot be financed from current revenues. And the debt limit for us is set at 10%, which is calculated by measuring whatever the debt payment would be against the general fund revenue. And the city is currently well below its debt limit. Next slide. We have our receivables policy. It says the city will ensure timely invoicing, monitoring, and collection of outstanding obligations owed to the city. This is from individual payers. It could be from other agencies to which the city provides services to. We have a number of interagency agreements, and we provide invoicing to them and making sure that we're monitoring the collection of revenues and receivables. And also we have a procedure in place to follow up on outstanding obligations to the city as well. Next slide. We have our grants management policy and procedures. It says city departments will actively pursue grant opportunities when deemed appropriate. So we're looking at the amount of funding that's provided. Do we have the staff capacity to carry out these programs? Also, will it, once the funds are exhausted on a grant, will the city have to absorb those costs? So we look at all those various metrics before deciding to pursue grants. And it allows us to leverage public funds to extend and enhance our current services, as well as to introduce any new initiatives and programs. This policy also includes a component for procedures in terms of applying for grants, for managing them, and then also for closing out. And it also details the roles and responsibilities of the various departments, including the role of the finance department in managing grants. Next slide. We have our capital assets policy and procedures, and this relates to purchased and donated assets. It meets the city capitalization threshold, meaning that the value is $5,000 or more. If we do have any of those assets, they are recorded in the city's accounting books as capital assets. We also have procedures for properly accounting for those assets. Next slide. It's our unclaimed funds / outstanding checks policy and procedures, which follows California Government Code. And we follow the process for unclaimed funds. Those funds that remain unclaimed for at least 3 years will become the property of the city of Pinole after following procedures to reach out to individuals who may have unclaimed funds and trying to get those out to them. We do regular reviews of things like stale dated checks and reach out to individuals in to the extent possible to try to get those funds to them. Next slide. So the next two are our investment policies. This one is our general investment policy, and the purpose is to define the parameters within which funds are to be managed and invested. The city does follow California state law in terms of its investment policy. We are sure to follow the SLY method, SLY, which stands for safety, liquidity, and yield. So we are always erring on the side of safety with investments. Most of our investments are in LAIF, or the Local Agency Investment Fund, which is a really safe fund. And then we do have other instruments such as certificates of deposit. We have some medium-term bonds, treasury bonds, and then some longer-term bonds also to take advantage of those interest income benefits over time. And we continue to follow those. And then this policy also sets the parameters for the percentage of funds that can be invested in the various types of instruments. Next slide. And then lastly, we have our pension investment policy. So this one is specific to the Section 115 pension trust. It is managed by PARS, which is Public Agency Retirement Services. We do contract with them to manage our pension trust. We have a set investment strategy that's set up, very safe strategy, but also trying to take advantage of the interest income for the trust to expand the lifespan of the assets in the trust. But again, similar to our general investment policy, this just sets the parameters on what percentage of the funds or the assets that are in the trust can be invested in various types of instruments. Next slide. So that concludes the portfolio of policies that we currently have in place and are following. We do have a future financial policy that is pending, and it's related to the Section 115 trust as well. We have the city's best practice that we've been using that was put into place, I believe, in fiscal year 18-19, but we do need to document that to make sure that we have something memorialized around how we can use those funds. So we'll be detailing the allowable use and then also the withdrawal of funds. So we will detail the formula that is used just to make sure that we're following the same process and best practice with withdrawing funds from the trust. This one is coming a little bit later just because we're working with Bartell and Associates. We've worked with them before. They're doing an updated review on our future pension costs. So kind of estimating, forecasting what our pension costs will be over the next 5 to 10 years. And then also looking at the lifespan of the Section 115 trust. So we'll be bringing that back before the City Council as a presentation in May. And with that, we'll return with the policy for the Section 115 trust as well. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or address any comments.
Thank you. We'll go to committee questions first. Treasurer Swearingen. Is the green light lit?
Now it's on. Thank you. On the grants management policy and procedures, and just a advice to the council on grants management. I think that, and I've always thought this, that grants are something that we're not pursuing near as much as we could and get the most out of what's available out there. But remembering that when those do come before the council and for acceptance, grants are a one-time program. And if it's in relationship to adding personnel and things like that, you got to remember that when that grant runs out, you still have to pay for those personnel or you have to lay them off. So those are just kind of little things to be aware of. And as much as I want grants, I also don't want to have us go out on a limb and then be stuck trying to figure out how we're going to pay for either the project or the activities the grant was funding for if it's ongoing. If it's a one-time grant for a one-time measure, that's fine. But if it's for ongoing, council should just be in the back of your mind, just be aware of what it could cost us financially down the road. So that's the only one glitch, and it's in the report. If you read the full report, it's all that's in there about that, and that warning is in there. So that's all. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Toms, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I have three areas. Thank you for the report. I'm going to start with the reserve policy. We have a practice that where we have a target of 50% or more. Should we have that in the policy?
Yes, I believe it is in the policy.
Okay, it's in the deeper
Yeah,
section.
it's actually under definitions and details. It's item number 1.
Okay, got it. Thank
Yes.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you. And then the debt policy. If we were to go out for a bond where the repayment of the bond comes from the taxpayers to say, get a jump start on infrastructure issues, would we then need to modify our debt policy, or is that only if the coverage isn't, if the coverage exceeds 10%?
coverage exceeds 10%, then yes, we would have to revisit the policy.
Okay. Great, thank you. And then also on the grants management policy, I'm wondering if you think that the departments might be able to include maybe a sentence of, if they have obtained a grant, and what was the staff cost to not only obtain the grant, but to manage the grant? Because I mean, I've heard in the work that I do that, yeah, that's great. We got 100,000 grant, but it costs us $50,000 in staff time or different regulations to get the grant. So the benefit, the difference would be a benefit of 50,000. So that might be worth it. But there's some where, you might spend $40,000 to get 45,000. So it would be good to have the council be aware of that. And it could be just a matter of in whatever reports that the departments are providing, that they just include that maybe in the fiscal analysis or somewhere. So I'd be interested in your thoughts in the future on how that could be implemented. And that's all I have.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any questions. So I'll bring it to Deputy Clerk Stone for public comments.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have Irma report.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor and committee members. I disagree with I'm going to speak about the grants management policy and procedures. I used to work for the Department of Justice for a grant funding program. There's no such thing as a liability on receiving a grant. There are grants that have administrative costs. I spoke to the city manager. Actually, I got an email. They were currently RFP for a grant writer. My question to this policy, we've had this policy of departments going out for grants, delaying the process, not receiving grants. Every day I hear about some city, even like San Pablo, that received $11 million from a grant writer. It's ridiculous that our city is so behind the ball on this one. What you're thinking is the possibility of recovering costs. Well, we can recover $11 million for administratively. Whatever needs to be fixed, whatever has to be done. My question is, with the departments who will be looking out for grants, are they trained? Do they know how to follow some of these definitions and details on how to file for a grant? Grants have deadlines. As we know, they're coming down from the federal, state, and county level. We got to get our foot in the door as soon as possible. We just can't wait. And right now I heard that we have staff capacity to get these grants going. Well, don't hold back. We've been behind so long, and I just disagree with what's been said. Grants is what holding a lot of cities together, putting a lot of businesses together. And I just feel that our city is losing out on these grants every day. I can send you of what's going on out there. And I've sent you copies of some of these to some of you. And I just want to make sure that a lot of the things that are listed here will take time. So if your department heads know the deadlines and procedures, we need to fast track these grants. Mayor, also, I have a second question. Can I go ahead and ask it now?
Yes.
Okay, my question is to the financial officer. When was the last forensic audit that the city of Pinole has had? And I'm not just talking about an administrative or whatever. I'm talking about a detailed forensic audit. If you can answer me, can you email me back or answer me at the city council meeting? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Yes, we do have one more telephone caller, last four numbers 5748. Please identify yourself and city of residence.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Anthony and I'm a longtime resident of over 40 years in Pinole, homeowner and taxpayer. I'd like to ask the committee a few questions around budget and finances. How much did we spend or plan to spend this year versus last year and or over the last 2 to 10 years on outsourcing and approving outside contractor consultants to do staff work or related city work? Can you give us a number with regard to that? And with all the hiring of new hiring of different staff head departments, directors, managers, assistants, etc. Don't you think we should consider reviewing those numbers as well as what we've done in the past with less staff? And that, because I think a lot of those salaries and packages should be handled in-house with regards to contracting outside contractors as consultants. And I know the last caller voiced that, as well as several other people in our community have voiced that. And some of that money can be saved and put towards crime, being the second question with regard to handling the increase of crime and things going on in and around Fitzgerald Drive. How much extra would it cost the city of Pinole to put on either one new police officer per year and or to put a satellite police station on the Fitzgerald Drive property? There's a lot of vacant properties out there, and I think we should seriously look at that and be proactive with all the increased crime coming with the holidays, the new store build out, the new buildings, condominiums, apartment build outs up and along Fitzgerald and Effian Way, where a lot of the crime and traffic problems are taking place now, have been so in the past, and can be guaranteed to be increased in the future. And last and not least, with regard to quality of life issues, regard our budgeting and our money, why can't more money be put forward on an immediate budget to fix things with our infrastructure needs, like immediate needs, like streetlight outages up and down Pinole Valley Road, defaced bridges on Appian Way freeway overcross that haven't been fixed with that metal bar there, and other items like the Adobe Road.
Thank you. Are there any other comments this afternoon?
No, Mayor, there are no more public comments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Treasurer Swearengin, do you have a question?
I have some comments on the two speakers, if you'd like to take them.
Sure.
Okay. Number one, to Mrs. Rupert, that's definitely not lost on me, the grant program. And I've been going to department heads and asking them about how much more we could do. And they are applying for grants.
I'm gonna stop you. We don't need to communicate directly to the public commenters this afternoon. We'll
I
have,
didn't. It was
just
comment,
mentioned-
that's comment is to you.
you said Ms. Rupert.
I mentioned Mrs. Rupert's
Okay.
comment because I'm talking about her right now, not the other
Okay.
person.
Okay, so keep your comments to staff at least. If you-
I've been talking with staff about grants, and this is an ongoing thing about the possibility of hiring a professional grant writer that could maybe get into a little more depth, but many of them we don't qualify for. And they've tried on some of them and they've come close, but they've been beat out by other cities. So it's not that we're not doing it. I agree that we need to do more. But grants are definitely something that is a source of income for the city of Pinole and all other cities. And she is correct. There are other communities that are getting pretty large grants. And so we are aware of that. And the department heads are aware of that also, and they are working on it. But I believe that we possibly do need a grant writer a professional grant writer. Maybe it takes some time to write grants. It's not a simple thing. And there are people who can write them and people who maybe you can't answer some of the questions because they're pretty involved in how you apply for them. So they are difficult to obtain. So I just want to say that it's not lost on us. We are looking at it. The other gentleman, how much did we spend on outsourcing contractors? This is another question that I have, and I, as treasurer, I am watching the contractors and their prices that are coming through, and I do question some of them, and I'm also asking for competitive bids the next time these outsourcing contractors come up for bid, because we do have in-house contractors. Some we have to have. We have to have the cleanup people. We have to have the HVAC. We have to have the electrical. Those people we have to have as outside contractors. We can't do that in-house. We don't have the professional capacity to do that. So I am trying to make sure that it is competitive and that we aren't getting gouged by any of our outside contractors. So that's not lost either. Quality of life, immediate needs. Yes, I think most complaints I get are streets. And definitely the stripings and the potholes in the streets is one of the comments I get the most. And definitely I take those right back to the department head that's in charge of streets and maintenance and let them know where the problems are, because we do have a lot of potholes. The problem with fixing the potholes is you can fix them, but when you have old asphalt and you put new asphalt into it, it doesn't adhere very well. So in 6 months, you're back having the pothole again. So we have to go more in depth to that, and that costs quite a bit of money. And we don't get from our gas tax and from our WIC tax, I'm sorry, not WIC tax, CCTA, money that we get every year. We do not get enough money to do what we need to do here. We've got about I'm going to say $6 or $8 million worth of street work that needs to be done. And we have about $1 million to do it with. So it's an ongoing long-term process. And we do the best we can with the funds that we have, but unless we get another fund source, we're basically playing catch up all the time. And that's where that's at. Yes, we do need a new police officer too. I believe that we have some people in training right now, and that we are going to put them on staff very soon. And I think we've got 2 that have just come on recently. So we are addressing that, and we hope that it's going to improve in the near future. So that's what I know. So that's an answer to those queries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Thomas, do you have any comments?
No other comments, just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Guillory, for your presentation. A couple of things that also came up in the public comments. Is there currently a cross-departmental training on our investment and financial policies that's provided to our department heads?
No. That hasn't been the practice, but
Okay.
something we could do.
It was brought up, I think, around the grants management policy specifically, but it made me question whether or not we had that for all department heads for them to hear this. I do know that they may watch our financial subcommittee meetings, but perhaps that may be something you look into in the next year.
And just to go back to the grants management policy, yes, that's been distributed. So people are pretty familiar with that. Just because most departments are looking at trying to pursue grants.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the forensic audit, when's the last time our city has gone through a forensic audit?
So as far as I know, the city hasn't been through a forensic audit. That's usually triggered by claims of illegal activities around finances. So it's not a normal practice to come in and do a forensic audit. And what I'll do, the question came up before, and we did correspond with Ms. Rupert via email sometime last year. So I can resend her the email with that information.
That'd be great. And if you can CC our committee as
Yes.
well, I think you may have from last year. I remember
Yes,
that. too.
will do.
Thank you. If there's new members. I'll leave the outside consultant questions and the questions around what we're spending on perhaps for the budget conversation, because I'm sure those probably are not provided. And we're talking about investment policy. I am interested in the future financial policy we have around section 115. And as that, I'm always interested in how we use the balancing act as a tool for us to engage the public in some of the financial decisions we're making. So I would be both encouraged and excited to see how might we use that tool for this type of policy development, and understanding folks on our side and the staff mapping out a plan to kind of get the public to understand why we have these policies and why it's important. I'm not sure I know how the kinks of that would work, but I am interested in leveraging that tool for that understanding for our public. So I'll just say that as a commentary, as an opportunity for it to come next to our council. But that's it for my comments. Are there any other comments from our council or for our committee? All right, do you have any final words or final comments?
I do not.
All
Thank
right,
you.
that means we are keeping going. So no action is requested. This is a subcommittee. It's a advisory committee, which makes recommendations to the council, which means our adjournment is at 3:34. Thank you all so much. Good afternoon.
Thank you.